All right, hello everyone, and welcome to what is hopefully one of many KFP online study groups. Join in if you are studying for the RACGP KFP exam. I'm hoping to sit in 2023.2, having not done so well on the 2023.1. I live in Mildura, Victoria, so I'm hoping to kind of connect with people online and most importantly get you to help to actually pass this exam as well, because it is one that I know lots of people struggle with. And without further ado, let's get to it. So what are we actually going to do tonight? So we've kind of gotten through the introduction section. My name is Kane Treble. I'm a GP registrar in Mildura. We're going to tackle a few KFP questions and go through the answers, and then spend a bit of time talking about study tips, where we're at now, and some things that can be helpful for those moving forward. Let me know if there are any troubles with the stream at all. Just leave a comment in the comments box below. Let me know if you're watching this live in the chat, or if you're watching on the replay, give me a hashtag team replay in the comments. I don't know, that's something that happens in live streams apparently. So let's get to what we're actually all here for, of course, and that is some practice KFP questions. Now, I am very happy to say we've been able to get our hands on some practice questions through our good friends over at, well, if it wants to load, there we go, KFP Bank. So KFP Bank has over 500 practice KFP questions, lots of study notes to read through with explanations of the answers as well. They can provide one-on-one feedback as well as an image library and offer a free trial. They haven't actually sponsored this live stream today, but they have agreed to let me use some of these questions for practice under no obligation to advertise them, but I thought I'd give them a shout out for letting us go ahead and practice today. Hopefully you've all had a bit of practice of some KFP questions already, so we'll get into our first question then. I'm going to put a timer up when the question appears for 2 minutes. In reality, in the actual exam, we have more than 2 minutes per question, but for the purpose of tonight as well, to help speed things up, I thought it might be worthwhile we try and get through them a little bit quicker than we would potentially do in the exam. It's always handy to have a bit of extra time at the end to be able to go through questions, and so we will try that tonight. So our first question can start now. So Jane is age 25, is a new patient to the practice, has recently moved to the area, has a past medical history of systemic lupus erythematosus, and is currently not on any regular medications. She's planning for her first pregnancy and wants to find out the effects the SLE might have on her future pregnancy. She does not smoke or drink. What pregnancy complications is Jane at risk of? Right, 7 complications of SLE, which you will advise Jane of. If you're feeling game to pop any of your answers in the chat. Otherwise, feel free to just answer it on your computer. All right, time is out there, and a little thank you there to Dinesh. I appreciate the thanks. Good to have you on the stream tonight, and hopefully you can let me know what you think is going on. And some fantastic responses there already. Let's move on then to the next question. Again, I'll put 2 minutes on the clock. Here we go. We might even get a little bit of thinking music in the background. Let me know if it's too distracting. All right, time's almost up for this one. Moving on to the final question in this section then. And I think we all knew this one was going to be coming. So she's heard about cyclophosphamide for SLE, her friend's on it and doing really well. She's wondering whether this would be appropriate for her. What advice recommendations would you give? Listing 4 in note form. All right, so that is our time up there. And awesome to see some answers coming through as well. let's step through the answers provided by KFP Bank, and there are a couple of extra little bits that I've kind of added in as well from my own thoughts. And for what it's worth, if you're anything like me, I saw this question and, geez, my heart sank. SLE, while it's not a terribly uncommon condition, it's not something that I had a lot of experience in, and I'll talk through some of my steps that I took when trying to answer this as well. So first thing to try and do in these kinds of questions is to make sure we're actually looking at the question properly, getting all that right information through. And so to start off with, I'm just going to draw on the screen here and kind of highlight the key points that we really should be paying attention to make sure we're actually answering the question properly. So we've got Jane, she's 25, new patient to the practice. She has SLE, not on any regular medications, planning for her first pregnancy, so important she's not pregnant yet at this stage, and wanting to find out the effects the SLE might have on her pregnancy, no smoking or drinking. So the first question was, what are the complications she is at risk of? And 7. Oh boy, I don't think in the actual exam we'd expected to be writing 7, but Dinesh, you've thrown out a bunch there which are absolutely fantastic. And admittedly, when I was first answering this question, I could only get to 3 or 4 before I started scratching my head. So a really handy trick for these kinds of ones, and I'll pop up as well. SLE flare-up is definitely one. You can see that as point number 4 there. Renal crisis, fantastic to see you've got that there. They've listed it as lupus nephritis, but I think any assessor marking that would certainly give you at least half the point there. The one thing I would pick on is the fact that the RACGP really don't like using acronyms or abbreviations, so I would actually spell out systemic lupus erythematosus, renal crisis. Not sure? Don't worry, me neither. Miscarriage, VTE, perfect. So thromboembolism, I'd probably go a little bit broader than specifying VTE specifically, but that is ultimately the thing we're most concerned about. And excellent to have you on board as well, Demir. So for this one, I think it's always good to think of, what if I can't think of answers specific for this question? And so fall back on some generics. You might not know specific complications of SLE in pregnancy, but I'm sure you know lots of complications that occur in pregnancy without SLE. And so the question becomes, well, could that be amplified or could that apply to people with SLE as well? And so things like early miscarriage, intrauterine growth restriction, preterm delivery, we do know there is an association with autoimmune conditions and these things. So that gives you a few free marks there that you can throw into there. So even if you go into one of these questions feeling like you don't have any of the answers at all, feel free to use that trick to try and get some marks through there, remembering to try and diversify answers as best as you can. So some awesome responses there. Question 2 then, what are the medications available? So this is a specific medications question. And in particular, it's relatively safe to treat in pregnancy. So this is going to change a lot of the things we would use outside of that setting, and fantastic to see things like prednisolone there. I think that was for the next answer. We'll go back to here. So yes, corticosteroids, and if you're going to list a class, given they have asked for 2 pharmacological options, and this, the way it's been worded by KFP Bank, it is a little bit vague. In the actual exam, I think they would probably word it more, list 2 specific medications or 2 drug classes. So if there is any ambiguity there, I probably would write something like corticosteroids and provide a specific example. That way I'm kind of covering both bases there, and I don't think this would fall into overcoding at all. Now our CDMARDs, the conventional synthetic disease-modifying antirheumatic drugs, and that's azathioprine. Biological disease-modifying antirheumatic drugs such as rituximab, and intravenous immunoglobulins, which wasn't listed on the KFP Bank response, but is listed in ETG, so I've popped that into there as well. Moving on then. She has heard about cyclophosphamide, wants to know if it could be applicable to her. So what advice or recommendations would you give to Jane? So this is then taking what you know about cyclophosphamide and applying it to her specific situation. Listing 4 in note form, and absolutely smashed it. Thank you, Dinesh. Cyclophosphamide is contraindicated in pregnancy, so a massive gold star for you there. I've even prepared some little animations if this wants to work. Oh, that looks terrible. I'll try and fix that for the next live stream. Given we do need a few more there, throw in things like how cyclophosphamide must be ceased at least 3 months before intending or planning pregnancy. In that time, while she's on cyclophosphamide, she would have to be on appropriate contraception, as well as, given we know how bad it can be for pregnancy, to consider things like egg harvesting or sperm banking before treatment with cyclophosphamide. And yep, thrown a few other awesome examples in there, so good to see. Ready for a few more questions? Get ready. John is a 45-year-old male presenting to your GP clinic with a 5-month history of a lesion on his cheek which has slowly been getting bigger. You decide to do an excisional biopsy which confirms your diagnosis of squamous cell carcinoma. What risk factors are associated with this condition? Please list 6 specific risk factors. Here's your thinking music. And moving on as well then, what advice would you give John to minimise the risk of developing further skin cancers? Right, 4 specific lifestyle modifications. Look, you guys have already smashed that question, so I'm actually going to skip ahead now, save a little bit of time, because it's time to go through the answers. So, this is a question that the college seems to love. So it is a good combination of preventative healthcare as well as something that's really, really common in Australia, which is dealing with skin cancers. I'm not sure where you guys are, but I'm in Mildura, which is about 3 kilometres from the surface of the sun. So we do a lot of skin cancer work here. So the answers you guys have given are absolutely brilliant. So sun exposure, and you can see on the list there is occupational sun exposure. So good to tie it to something a little bit more specific, but certainly sun exposure would be giving you a mark there. Now, it seems to be a little bit hit and miss as to specifying things like acquired immunodeficiency syndrome versus just specifying an immunosuppressed state, but definitely it is on the list. Immunosuppressant medications, and this is where there can be that doubling up there. So again, to try and diversify answers, I'd probably try and pick something from some of the other categories. Smoking definitely is a very big risk factor for skin cancers. As for lichen sclerosis, I would have to double check that. I think I would probably say I'd probably go a different answer first. Certainly on the list here is something like actinic keratoses, which again ties into that previous skin cancer history as well. So some people might be a bit nervous putting both of those two answers down. Certainly, Dinesh, you've got some awesome ones there as well of sun exposure. Previous traditions to that area. Not entirely sure what that means. If you're happy to fill me in, though. Genetic predisposition, so strong family history of skin cancers would probably be good there. And I probably wouldn't specify just white skin so much as fair skin, or if you're happy to put down, specify a low Fitzpatrick skin type. Radiation. Yep, sorry, that makes a lot more sense. Yep, understand that. Yeah, perfect. So radiation exposure to that site, definitely. Now, for our next thing, what advice are we going to give John to minimise the risk of developing further skin cancers? Excellent. Avoid excessive sun exposure. Excellent. If I don't know how old you guys are, but slip, slop, slap was deeply ingrained into us when we were growing up, and you've hit the nail there. Now, the SPF 50 Plus is the best available at the moment and what would be recommended. I have popped onto here, though. If we duck back for just a second, I'll see if this link is going to work. No, that's all right. Looking at the handy guidelines, they actually said SPF 30 Plus, which I found to be an interesting little discrepancy. I would probably stick to the SPF 50 Plus, given it obviously offers better protection and is obviously readily available, so I would stick to that one. Stop smoking would be absolutely fantastic. In this situation, though, I think the risk you would take would be it doesn't actually specify that he does smoke, and there is a thing with the exam that they say if they haven't given you information, try not to kind of make some up on your own. So given we don't know whether or not he does actually smoke, I probably wouldn't be putting that one down myself. Excellent. Well done, though, guys. And you ready for another couple of questions? So your time starts now. Sandra is a 35-year-old female, presents to your clinic with a 1-week history of an intensely itchy rash. Her examination is normal apart from an itchy rash involving her trunk, limbs, fingers, palms of her hands, toes and soles of her feet. The rash does not affect her scalp or face. She suffers from epilepsy for which she's on sodium valproate. The picture of the rash is given below. What is the most likely diagnosis? Please write one specific diagnosis. A little late on the clock, sorry. We'll take about 30 seconds of that. probably wrap up the time here. Moving on then, what would be the appropriate management of Sandra's condition? Please write 4 specific management steps. All right. So some awesome responses there. Good job, guys. And this one is scabies. So good job to Demir. 100% correct there. And Dinesh, this is probably the thing they're trying to trick you with here. And certainly the sodium valproate's the thing that I'm sure you saw and thought, oh, this could be a drug eruption. And yes, we know anti-epileptic medications can be associated with drug eruptions as well that can give you these kind of widespread itchy rashes as well. I think the thing that helps differentiate it here, and this is where, again, you have to be very, very particular with teasing out the right information from the stem of it, is that it does not affect her face or scalp, which would be spots that I would expect you would still be able to see those drug eruptions, which tend to be more confluent in nature, which, as you've kind of said into there. As for then what we would do to treat it, so definitely calamine lotion for itching. I don't think that oral antihistamines make a massive difference for scabies, but certainly if you are going down that drug eruption pathway, as you have done, certainly oral antihistamines can help with, of course, as you've got there, stop the offending drug. And certainly if you do stop the offending drug, particularly with the anti-epileptic medications, the rash does resolve quite quickly. And don't worry, Dinesh, this is why we practice, so that we can improve and get these things. And don't forget as well, in the actual exam, you normally get relatively crappy pictures. Certainly if you've sat any of them before, when you get the printed exam, if they do stick to a paper-based format, just interpreting the picture in the first place can be difficult. And try to think back that they're not trying to trick you with anything, not trying to be too nasty with it. Again, there's 26 cases per exam, so you can completely train wreck, a couple of cases and still do absolutely fine. And this is why we practice. Demir, well done. So cover the whole body with permethrin cream. Don't get caught up on the spelling at all. That's something that they're very clear. They don't care if you don't spell it properly, provided that it's clear what you're intending to actually prescribe. And yes, perfect. Treat all household members. Wash the bed sheets. Again, oral antihistamines don't tend to be overly effective for scabies, but certainly isn't going to cause any harm. Calamine lotion is the thing that RACGP and handy guidelines really try and push for treatment for this. Now, also things like this to advise would be advised to stay home until the rash settles, given it is going to be a contagious thing. All right, so I just want to bring up quickly, because I did manage to track it down while we were looking at the cases here. If this wants to work, drumroll please. Hey, there we go. So this is the handy guidelines talking about sunscreen for skin cancer prevention, which if we zoom into here, does specify SPF 30 plus or higher, broad spectrum sunscreen application. Again, I would probably specify and stick to SPF 50 plus, but know that it really, as long as you're putting something sensible there, I think you would be getting the mark. Some of the risk factors they've specified, again, age over 40, Northern European ethnicity, so white, yes, but specifying something along those lines, fair skin with a tendency to freckle, history of sunburns, and of course the immunosuppressed state, as you mentioned very well. Bring that up to there. So, well done, guys. I'll have to try and fix this so that icons appear properly, but appreciate the gesture. And those were the questions that I had here. The next thing I actually wanted to show you guys quickly, because I'm not quite sure where you're at in terms of sitting the exam, but something that you can use if you're trying to find more exam questions or get more practice in as best you can would be a little tool that I've made. So as part of the whole generally practicing thing, which I just thought I was so clever coming up with that name, I've actually got the website here, which I'll zoom in a little bit so it's a little bit easier to see on the screen. I am trying to build a bank of free open source KFP questions for people to practice. We'll see what happens with that. But scrolling across though, the tool I wanted to show off tonight, not that one, is, here it is, sorry, KFP Case Generator. So if you click through to that link there, this is just a quick little tool that for any patient you actually see in the clinic, and what I've taken to doing in recent weeks is to go through, select 5 or 6 patients that I've seen for that day, and just enter some details. So let's say I saw an 86-year-old female who patient was presenting with lower urinary tract symptoms and low-grade temperatures. Something as simple as that. We could even specify no significant history, no regular meds. Hit submit, and this will then prompt you for KFP style questions around that presentation. So what are 3 specific examination features of this presentation? So I'd be looking for things like suprapubic tenderness, for positive full ward test, although you could argue that's an investigation. From off the top of my head, I'm fairly certain the RACGP have accepted that as an examination feature previously. And what else? We've got urinary symptoms and low-grade temperatures. I could specify no other focus of infection, such as consolidation or crackles to the chest. So trying to give a specific example of what I'm looking for. That one's not the best one. I probably wouldn't get a mark for it, but I'm trying to just think off the top of my head 3 specific examination findings. 5 investigations for this presentation. This is probably not the best one for this one here, but certainly we would be including here something like a urine MCNS. I would want a heart rate. Well, that's actually... specific examination features would be heart rate and blood pressure. There we go. That way we've investigated for sepsis. Thank you very much, Dinesh. Greatly appreciated. It's still very much a work in progress, but I'm trying to make it as user-friendly and helpful for people as possible. So again, a presentation like this, we're probably not going to be doing 5 investigations, but this will cycle through random questions just to get you thinking in that KFP format, and write 2 specific options to further assess this presentation. This could be book for review in 24 or 48 hours to assess for further symptoms or recovery, and review previous microscopy, culture and sensitivity results to track for resistance patterns or potential structural anomalies. Or precipitating factors, that's what I'm looking for, sorry. Now, that last one's probably overcoding, so I'd probably just simplify it down to sticking to reviewing previous microscopy, culture and sensitivities for evidence of resistance patterns. And that would be more than sufficient for that. So have a play around. Feel free to use it. Obviously, any feedback is very welcome. If there's different types of questions or things you would like to have added in there, just let me know. So that's pretty much all I had packaged for tonight. Thank you guys very much for joining me. It's been awesome having you here and having the interaction. I find it really helpful myself to be putting all this together because it forces me to study, and hopefully you guys find it helpful too. Feel free to spread the word. I'm going to try and make this a weekly thing until the exam, and realistically, even if I pass the exam this time, I think I'm going to make this a regular thing ongoing so that we have more resources out there for people to study, because I hate the KFP. Thank you very much circulating in the groups. Cheers, guys. So, thanks for your time. Thanks for your patience. This is still a bit of a work in progress. I hope you all have a lovely rest of the night. Feel free to use these tools, and hopefully I'll see you guys next week. Thanks. We'll get more music going.